Abraham Lincoln grew up in a poor pioneer family. He lived in a log cabin. He only went to school for about 1 year. Lincoln struggled to live and learn. However, he worked hard and rose to become the 16th President of the United States. He faced some of the most difficult challenges in our country's history. Let's find out more about one of our country's greatest presidents, Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, on a farm in Kentucky to a pioneer family. Pioneers were people who settled in the western lands of America. Almost from the time he could walk, Abe hunted and fished for food and helped out on the family farm. When Abe was still a young boy, his family moved to a new farm in the brand new state of Indiana. A couple of years later, his mom died and his dad remarried. Sometimes he went to school in a one-room schoolhouse. Though he did not attend school often, young Abe Lincoln loved books. He read anything he could get his hands on. He spent every free moment reading. As Abe grew older, he developed an interest in history and the law. One of his favorite books was the biography of George Washington. Lincoln was inspired by George Washington's character and courage. Throughout his life, Lincoln tried to conduct himself with honesty and integrity, just as George Washington did. In 1830, the Lincoln family moved again, this time to Illinois. And when he turned 21, Abe decided to set off on his own. He took a job on a flatboat, carrying goods down the Mississippi River to New Orleans. It was on the trip to New Orleans that Abraham Lincoln got his first close-up look at the horrors of slavery. Slavery is a system that allows people to own other people and force them to work. Abe was a good employee. The owner of the boat was so impressed with Abe's skills and integrity that he offered him a job as a clerk in a general store in New Salem, Illinois. In New Salem, Abe quickly became known as a great storyteller. He was well liked and became very popular in the town. So he decided to give politics a try. There were two major political parties in America at that time, the Democrats and the Whigs. Abe ran for the Illinois state legislature. As a Whig, he spoke to the voters in a simple style for which he would later become famous. Lincoln lost the election. For the next 2 years, Abe tried his hand at different jobs. He opened a grocery store with a friend. He was a land surveyor, too. Then he became the local postmaster. Being in charge of the post office gave him the opportunity to read newspapers from all around the country. He also found time to study law. Becoming a lawyer back then was a lot different than it is now. Without going to college or law school, Abe was able to practice law. Lincoln was still interested in politics, so in 1834, he tried again for the Illinois state legislature. This time, he was successful. Lincoln enjoyed discussing the political issues of the day. One person he debated with often was a young politician named Stephen Douglas, a Democrat. One of the issues they would discuss and debate was slavery. Lincoln believed slavery was wrong and unjust. On the other hand, he didn't believe that the federal government had the authority to stop slavery in the states where it was legal. In November of 1842, Abe Lincoln married Mary Todd. In time, the Lincolns had 4 sons. In 1846, Lincoln was elected to the United States House of Representatives. The Lincolns moved to Washington, D.C. While in office, he introduced a resolution to free the children of enslaved people in Washington, D.C. He also proposed that owners who freed enslaved people be compensated by the government. Lincoln's views on slavery were not very popular. After a single term, Lincoln and his family moved back to Springfield, Illinois. There, he went back to being a lawyer. He traveled around the Illinois prairie, meeting and talking to hundreds of people. He also became known for his kindness, his reliability, and his honesty. The debate over whether new states should allow slavery continued. There were many people in America who wanted to abolish or end slavery. They were called abolitionists. Political leaders from the South knew that if new states joining the Union were not allowed to have slavery, the South could never have political power in Congress. Lincoln joined a new political party called the Republican Party, and in 1858 accepted its nomination to run for Senate against Senator Stephen Douglas. In accepting the nomination, Lincoln summed up his position on slavery. It is one of his most famous speeches. "A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently, half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall. But I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other." Lincoln lost the election, but he became a national figure. Then, 2 years later, in 1860, the Republicans chose him as their candidate for President of the United States. Lincoln was the only candidate who was against the spread of slavery. But he campaigned that he would leave slavery alone in the states where it already existed. Lincoln won, and in March 1861, Abraham Lincoln was sworn in as President of the United States. In his inaugural address, he appealed to the South to reconsider and return to the Union. But one by one, the Southern states voted to secede or leave the United States. A new country, the Confederate States of America, or the Confederacy, was formed. Abraham Lincoln vowed to keep the Confederate States a part of the Union. The Union was the group of states that remained loyal to the federal government. But war could not be stopped. On April 12, 1861, the Confederate Army opened fire on the Union Army at Fort Sumter in South Carolina. The Civil War had begun. A civil war is a war between two groups of people of the same country. The war raged on for years, and hundreds of thousands of Americans died. In September 1862, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Emancipation means to free someone. It set all the enslaved people in the Confederacy free. The war now had two purposes: to preserve the Union and to end slavery.
By the President of the United States of America, a proclamation, whereas on the 22nd day of September, in the year of our Lord, 1862, a proclamation was issued by the President of the United States containing, among other things, the following to wit: that on the first day of January, in the year of our Lord, 1863, all persons held as slaves shall be then thenceforward and forever free.
From July 1st to July 3rd, 1863, the bloodiest battle of the Civil War was fought in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Many believe it was a turning point in the war, where the Union Army defeated the Confederate Army. On November 19, 1863, President Lincoln gave a speech to dedicate the Soldiers' National Cemetery in Gettysburg. It became known as the Gettysburg Address, one of the most famous speeches in American history. In the speech, Lincoln redefined the Civil War as a struggle not merely for the Union, but as a new birth of freedom for all Americans. The war continued on for 2 more years. In 1864, President Lincoln ran for re-election and won. On April 9, 1865, at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia, General Robert E. Lee surrendered the Confederate Army to General Ulysses S. Grant. The Civil War was over. Just 5 days later, President Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theater in Washington. While in the theater, Lincoln was shot in the head by John Wilkes Booth, an actor who thought he was helping the Confederacy. Lincoln died the following day, April 15, 1865. President Abraham Lincoln had led the country through one of its more difficult periods in history. He had vowed to keep the Union together, and he did. With his leadership, the long struggle to abolish slavery in America had come to an end. Today, he is remembered as one of America's greatest presidents and a symbol of freedom to people all over the world.